Hello, everyone. I'm Tanya Rivero in for Elaine Quijano. Thank you for joining us. President Biden meets with Israel's outgoing president at the White House as the country shifts power to a new government. The talks with Reuven Rivlin were expected to focus on U.S. efforts to revive the Iran nuclear deal. The Trump administration pulled out of the pact in 2018. It had been long opposed by former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Sunday, Israel's new foreign minister told the U.S. he has, quote, serious reservations about the Biden White House's hopes of reviving the deal. During their meeting Monday, President Biden reassured President Rivlin that, quote, Iran will never have nuclear weapons on my watch. Those hopes appear strained overnight. President Biden authorized airstrikes targeting facilities used by Iranian-backed militias along the Iraq-Syria border. The Pentagon says the strikes were in retaliation for recent drone attacks against American troops. The White House defended the move at a press briefing Monday.
The targeted strikes were directed at facilities used by Iran-backed militias involved in these ongoing attacks for purposes including weapons storage, command, logistics, and unmanned aerial vehicle operations. So Article 2, the self-defense, the defense of the United States and our interests is our domestic justification for these strikes announced yesterday. We will take, and he believes we should and will take necessary and appropriate measures to defend U.S. personnel, partners, and allies in the region.
Iraq condemned the strikes, saying it does not want its country to become a, quote, arena for settling scores. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, Congress is running out of time to get things done before the 4th of July recess. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is introducing a resolution that would create a select committee to investigate the January 6th Capitol attack. 5 of the 13 members would be appointed in consultation with Republicans. Plus, the battle to pass a bipartisan infrastructure bill wages on. President Biden angered Republicans last week after he appeared to link a bipartisan proposal to a larger plan backed only by Democrats. He said, quote, if this is the only thing that comes to me, I'm not signing it. It's in tandem. But by the weekend, he walked those comments back. For more, let's bring in Nikole Killion, Meridith McGraw, and Tyler Pager. Nikole is a CBS News congressional correspondent. Meridith is a national political correspondent for Politico. And Tyler is a White House reporter for The Washington Post. Welcome to all of you. Nikole, what can you tell us about the confusion surrounding whether these two infrastructure bills are indeed linked?
Well, it is confusing, especially for people at home. I mean, the bottom line is that, there are these two different packages. There's a bill that was negotiated between Republicans and Democrats here on Capitol Hill. It's targeted, kind of focuses on the traditional infrastructure. And then there is a larger package that Democrats have been working on, what's known as a reconciliation package, because they would have to use a special procedure, budget procedure to put that through. But that would encompass more of the president's priorities when it comes to infrastructure, whether that's addressing this care economy, things like child care, climate, etc. So what happened is that back on Thursday, when this deal was announced at the White House, President Biden suggested that he would not sign this infrastructure bill unless this reconciliation package also passed through the Congress. And so a lot of Republicans said, hey, slow down. That's not what we agreed to. So there was a lot of uproar. And so we saw the president kind of walk back his comments over the weekend, expressing his full support for this infrastructure package. And just a short time ago, actually, our Major Garrett asked the president once again kind of what his bottom line is. And he, in essence, said that it is exactly what they negotiated, what they agreed to. So at this point in time, the White House, the president is kind of standing by this position that he remains supportive of this infrastructure package, independent of the reconciliation package. But if you talk to Democratic leaders here on Capitol Hill, they are linking these two things. And so that is still upsetting folks like Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who says, again, hey, this is not an honest gesture here. It's a hollow gesture if Democratic leaders don't also decouple these two packages going forward.
And Tyler, you recently wrote a profile on one of the key White House negotiators on the infrastructure deal, Steve Ricchettis. What is his style, and does it appear to be working?
Yeah, so Steve Ricchettis is a longtime Biden aide who now serves as counselor to the president and has kind of been dispatched as the senior White House official overseeing these infrastructure negotiations. And in the profile that you referenced, we spoke to a lot of people that describe Steve Ricchettis as kind of the extroverted part of Biden, someone who is really invested in relationships with people, someone who has a Rolodex that's quite large around Washington. And is someone who, is very eager to, invest in personal relationships and work those. So it seems that he has found success in speaking with both Democrats and Republicans, progressive Democrats like Representative Ro Khanna to Republican senators who are working on these negotiations. They all had praise for Steve Ricchettis as someone who could confidently speak on behalf of the president and who was really invested in getting a bipartisan deal. And I think that is another part of Biden that Ricchettis really represents, is someone who wants to find compromise, someone that wants to work across the aisle and really get something done rather than just posturing as someone who wants that. And I think there's some in the administration that Republicans particularly were skeptical of in terms of how committed they were to a deal. But Steve Ricchettis, they found a real partner in getting there. And, the agreement that they came to last week, I think, is the culmination of that work.
All right, now I want to play what Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said about the president's walk back on linking the infrastructure bills. Let's listen.
I appreciate the president saying that he's willing to deal with infrastructure separately, but he doesn't control the Congress, and the Speaker and the Majority Leader of the Senate will determine the order. And so what I did this morning is to call on the president to ask the Majority Leader and the Speaker to deal with these issues separately, to deal with them separately. That's the way the deal was negotiated according to the 10 Republicans, I can assure you, who were in the discussion. There was no agreement that they would be linked. And so
Nikole, how's that going to go over with Democratic leadership? And what are the serious roadblocks remaining that threaten a bipartisan infrastructure deal?
Well, again, we know that senators that are a part of this bipartisan group are working to craft this legislation. And, really the Senate Minority Leader is the one to watch in all of this. He has not signed off on this deal, although he did give plenty of room to these negotiators to craft the deal. They've been keeping him apprised of the developments. But I think even with his comments and his concerns today, you can already see potentially battle lines being drawn out here in his calls to Speaker Pelosi and to Leader Schumer to kind of walk back their comments about decoupling these two pieces of legislation. And, even Democrats would argue that, look, this is no secret that we have had this two-track strategy, that this is kind of how we intended to proceed. So I think, the Senate is out right now, but if they were in, I think you would hear a lot of that back and forth this week as this plays out. But look, Republicans, again, who have been part of these bipartisan negotiations, continue to operate in good faith. They don't seem too concerned about the president's comments over the weekend. Like I said, they're kind of ready to roll up their sleeves and try to hammer out this legislative language. At the same time, we know that this reconciliation process is also proceeding with Senator Bernie Sanders crafting that portion of the bill. So, until we kind of know the devil in the details, it's still, I think, too early to predict how this will all play out. But certainly, these negotiations continue to be very fragile, but I think your cues as to whether or not it will ultimately succeed will come from both the Republican leader and Democratic leaders as well.
And so, Tyler, to Nicole's point that Senator Sanders is involved in crafting this reconciliation bill and has been very vocal about what he wants to see in it, is the White House prepared to deliver to progressives on a larger reconciliation bill, particularly in their climate change initiatives?
Yeah, I think that is a big question that progressives are waiting on. And I think what the White House has to balance is placating progressives who are calling for, robust spending across the board, particularly on as it relates to climate change, while also ensuring that they can get 50 votes in the Senate, right? And that includes more moderate Democrats like Senator Joe Manchin and Senator Kirsten Sinema, who, Joe Manchin, when he heard the number of $6 trillion that Bernie Sanders put out, he said, that seems too big for me. And so the White House's challenge is finding the common ground there. So not only do they have to worry about keeping the Democrats and Republicans in line on one side for this infrastructure deal, they also have to work in their own party to keep everyone on board in that way. And, as we saw today, Sunrise Movement, the progressive climate group, was outside the White House today protesting with members of Congress, including Jamal Bowman, the representative from New York, calling on the White House to invest more in spending to combat climate change. So, there is a more hurdles and challenges that lie ahead in this intra-party battle over how big to go on the budget reconciliation package. Obviously, Bernie Sanders and the progressives are pushing for a much more robust spending program than they're getting in the infrastructure program, but they have to make sure they can get those 50 votes to pass that in the Senate.
And Meridith, I want to turn to you now. I haven't forgotten about you. New York prosecutors met with Trump Organization attorneys today over a case involving alleged misrepresented financial information. What's the latest you can tell us about that? Are we close to seeing charges?
Well, it really does feel like we're reaching the climax of what has been a now years-long investigation done by the Manhattan District Attorney and by the New York Attorney General into the Trump Organization and the former president's own business dealings. They're looking at things like whether or not they improperly gave benefits to employees, whether there were some sketchy things going on with their taxes or insurance claims. And they've told the Trump Organization that they are considering criminal charges here. Trump's attorneys are asking them to back off of this, but they are making an aggressive push here as they reach what seems to be the conclusion of their investigation. And they really have their sights set on Alan Weisselberg, who's been a longtime Trump Organization aide. And I was talking to a former assistant aide to Trump who said that there really are only two people who really know what's going on with the Trump businesses, and that's Donald Trump himself and Weisselberg. When Trump came to the White House, he, of course, handed over power of his business to his kids and Mr. Weisselberg. But there is a lot of pressure on him now, and it does seem like we could be potentially seeing charges come forward possibly as soon as next week.
Wow, that is soon. All right. So, although, like you said, this investigation has been going on for a while. Tyler, I do want to ask you about former Attorney General William Barr. He does seem intent on controlling the narrative about his role in confronting the former president's false claims about widespread voter fraud. What is he saying, and is that consistent with his actual record on the matter?
Yeah, there was a piece out, excerpt from a book in the Atlantic by John Carl about this exact topic. And I think this is what we're going to continue to see with a slew of Trump books coming out over the next few weeks and into the summer about former Trump officials trying to settle scores and share their own narrative of what happened. And this is what we're seeing from former Attorney General Barr about trying to set the record straight from his perspective about the arguments and disputes he had with President Trump as it relates, particularly to election fraud. And I think that is, progressives and Democrats are eager to counter Trump administration officials, as you mentioned, their accounts of what happened, and say, there were many opportunities that the Attorney General had to intervene before he ultimately, left office at the end of Trump's tenure. And so I think that is one of the areas that we'll see the fight over the narrative, right? When Trump administration officials did what or what they didn't do, to culminate in what happened on January 6th and continued as Trump was, rallying this weekend in Ohio and continuing to dispute the results of the election. And I think as we continue to see the fallout and the consequences of those falsehoods, that is where we're going to see this battle over the narrative and who did what or didn't do what in order to try to stop the promulgation of these lies.
Right, and you could argue that the Attorney General actually added some fuel to the fire at the beginning by saying he was going to investigate some of these, these alleged incidents of fraud, which some would say gave them, some legitimacy. But I want to turn, before we run out of time, I want to turn to Meridith once more about your piece about former President Trump's return to the rally circuit. What was the purpose of his public appearance, and how did it go?
Well, over the weekend, Trump went to rural Northeast Ohio for a rally that was billed in support of Max Miller. He's a longtime aide to Trump, who's running against current Congressman Gonzalez, who was one of the 10 Republicans who voted for Trump's impeachment in the aftermath of the January 6th riots. And so it was billed in support of Max Miller, but I'll tell you what, I talked to a lot of rally goers there who said Max who, Gonzalez who. They were really there to see Trump. And he is going to be coming back on the rally trail. He has many more planned for this summer in support of candidates, who are running against people who voted for his impeachment. But with the former president not on Twitter, not on Facebook, he's been stripped of a lot of ways that he typically communicates with his supporters. This is a way for him to connect with them, to stay in the spotlight and to stay relevant. But, going back to what you were saying about Bill Barr and election fraud, it really was fascinating to see just how much that was a focus of the supporters there. They really wanted to hear the president talk about how they feel the election was stolen in 2020. These are things they truly believe. And it was really interesting right before the rally. I'd never seen it before, but there was a PowerPoint presentation on that a math teacher from Cincinnati gave that was trying to prove to folks that it was in fact stolen, which it was not. And so that's going to be an ongoing narrative as these events go on throughout the summer.
And it's really incredible that the lie continues to have life. All right, well, Meridith McGraw, Nikole Killion, and Tyler Pager, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.